Hello there beautiful, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joesephyr and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now in today's video we're going to be talking about a character that I'm personally very excited for, but I think is probably going to be fairly contentious across the community, which is going to be Vayne, and he's going to be joined by Cloud of Darkness's return, who also returns with reworked BT and BT Plus stuff, and they're also going to be joined by Iroha and Strago on their banners, as long as things match up with the JP version anyway. So if you'd like to learn more about Vayne, about the Cloud of Darkness, and about the event that comes with them, then of course stay tuned and keep on watching. Of course, before we get started, don't forget to check out all my social media links down below. Over on Twitch, I'll be streaming this event as it goes live on Wednesday, as well as every other event that goes live on Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, Final Fantasy 14 we've got loads of, Smash Bros, all sorts of other things. Come and find me on Twitch if you'd like to join us. Don't forget about the meetup that we have on November the 7th on the Sunday as well. So if you're in the UK, be sure to come on down. Come and find us at Meltdown London for some drinks, some good games, some Dissidia obviously, and hopefully a really good time where I'll get to meet some of you guys face to face. And then obviously over on Patreon, I shout out one of my patrons every time I release a new video, and today that person is going to be Baka Shift, who has actually been one of my longest standing patrons and has Caius on their title card, and a massive thank you goes out to you for supporting the channel for as long as you have. And if you're interested in a title card as well as a plethora of other benefits, then perhaps you'd like to consider joining in with Patreon as well and supporting the channel further. Lastly, of course, don't forget to check out all the other content creators and resources for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia, with special regards to Leo Bop, who translates all of the Japanese stuff over on Reddit, the Tombury Troop, who provides amazing infographics and details on the Lufenia missions as they happen, Rem working on DissidiaDB.com and all the amazing work they do on there, and Dissidia Compendium, as they are all resources that I use on this very channel and are very useful to everyone as well as me. So as with a lot of BT debut banners, we actually have two banners to talk about this time around, and the first of which is going to be looking at Cloud of Darkness, their entire kit, including their BT, Strago, his LD and all of his kit, and then Edgar with his EX for some reason. So all of these characters that like Edgar and King get their level 80s here. Strago is still a really good character and is a massive benefit, or gets massive benefits from being C90 later down the line. But I think if you've lived this long without Strago, you probably could continue to do so. And honestly, I think a lot of people already have both Strago and Cloud of Darkness. But looking at Cloud of Darkness getting a slight rework, insulating appendages is no longer a terrible move, because it hits for double HP dumps, which is a massive difference for them, and it means that it's a move that you might actually want to use on the odd occasion. And then the LD board adds a pretty hefty damage increase to Cloud of Darkness, because while they have the darkness buff up, as long as it's between 1 and 4 stacks, you get 20% HP damage up on them. And then if you've got 5 or more through the use of their LD, you have 50% HP damage up. That's a lot. Like, that's enough that makes you possibly even think twice about using the skill 2, the Zero Form Particle Beam, for the fear of losing those stacks, because 50% HP damage is a lot to gain. You might actually consider using the LD more than once just to have those stacks. And then obviously they get a BT plus as well. So if you've used Cloud of Darkness's BT before, as a lot of us have, you'll know that the friend unit BT version at least gives you the follow-up attacks after every move. And then obviously when Cloud of Darkness breaks an enemy, they then get a free turn to do whatever they want to with it, whether they use Zero Form Particle Beam, or they can now use Insulating Appendages or their LD. But with a single book, you get obviously a stronger version of the attack, and with the LB2, you get an extended duration of the burst effect by 3 actions up to 8, and then party effects include HP damage up and Brave Overflow up, which is really nice because, you know, Cloud of Darkness doesn't have a lot of party-wide benefits, but having this on top of the 50% damage increase on their follow-up attacks is going to mean that those follow-up attacks are going to start hurting rather a lot. And then obviously at LB3 you get 2 uses of it. So having this go off for a pretty long time, 16 turns worth of that follow-up is pretty nasty. And obviously with having so much delay, having so much just damage on the board, Cloud of Darkness is really good at just blitzing enemies that require that don't require taking turns, so you can just zero turn them with ease. As a friend unit, Cloud of Darkness still shines brightly, like by having all these additional benefits. It's absolutely not a waste to like 3 out of 3 Cloud of Darkness. However, it is a waste, I would say, to do anything less than that. At this point, and this will be the case with Vayne and pretty much most BT plus units going forward, you'll typically want to start picking and choosing between them because you're not going to have enough resources to do them all, and many of them are going to ask you to realistically use all 3 ingots on them from this point on, because you would rather just use a 3 out of 3 BT plus unit than most of these units that don't have one. So if you are going to go in on Cloud of Darkness, you're probably going to use a book, because without it, you're probably not going to use them. But there's a lot to like there if you do like Cloud of Darkness. With just a book, like, you can still get away with it, but realistically, you want that 20% HP damage up to the party, and more importantly, you want 2 uses of that fantastic follow-up attack. Okay, so now let's talk about Vayne. So we'll talk about Vayne's banner first. So Vayne's banner will contain all of Vayne's kit, new LD, new BT, Iroha's kit, including her LD, and this is actually one that I'd like to get hold of. I saved pulling on Iroha the first time around, even though she has a really cool LD call ability that saves you from using all your bravery whenever you do damage, so that I could pull for it here. I love Vayne, and I'm going to start the video by saying that, or this part of the video by saying that, I adore Vayne. He's one of my favourite characters in this game to play. I have a personal tie with him because he was my main in NT when I played NT for a long while. I just really enjoy him, which is weird because he's a turn hogger character. I don't typically like those very much. And Vayne is a character that is very contentious amongst the community from this point onwards. Also, King EX is on there, but we don't have to talk about that. So, Vayne gets a rework, which is actually a pretty hefty one. So, Mac Wave now does 80% splash damage to non-targets, and while you're using the plus versions of either of his moves, you don't consume ability uses, so you can literally just pick one of them, Force of Will, and spam it to your heart's content. And you just keep going on and on and on. And bear in mind that his EX regenerates like a copy of each of his skills. You are not running out of his skills anytime soon. So you get more uses of Force of Will as well. So you get, and then you get more bravery hits in it. So it goes 4 hit brave HP, re-break, 4 hit brave HP, and you get bravery back from the first one. So the second one deals more damage. And again, you get like not having to use your ability uses while you have the plus versions of it. And the plus versions of his skills come from having 3 stacks of his Conqueror's power buff, which means that you can then just get 3 free turns and you just continuously use it. You are going to be pressing Force of Will with Vayne a lot, just as an FYI, whereas Mac Wave gives you 2 stacks of Conqueror's power so that you then don't have to, you only sort of have every other turn where you're not getting 3 turns in a row. So Vayne's LD attack, Contempt, is a multi-hitting brave HP attack, as most of them are these days. They give him the full stacks of his Conqueror's power buff, or if you already have Conqueror's power at 3 stacks, you get Contempt Plus, so that you can extend that buff for a short while, so that you're able to just keep hold of it and do more moves that way. But typically all that means is that you can use Contempt at any time during your rotations with Vayne, so that you're never running out of the Contempt buff that you get from it. So the Contempt buff actually kind of leans him more into a damage dealing, offensive supporting role by giving Party Max Brave attack, HP damage up, and Brave regen, which are all very nice things to have, especially considering that he is in fact a damage dealer primarily. Now, with Vayne's kit as a whole, re-breaking over multiple turns, as opposed to, say, Cloud of Darkness delaying for 3 turns in one shot using Zero Form Particle Beam, is slightly different. There are going to be Lufenia orbs that are particularly strict on turns, and therefore having a turn hogger that also pushes the enemy further away may not work with the French vanilla fantasy of not letting the Lufenia orb go off. And there is I want to say a little bit of a misunderstanding that Vayne's damage is really low because he only has 2 HP dumps in Force of Will and they're 4 hit brave HP attacks, so comparatively to a lot of characters, he doesn't do as much damage. However, you have to remember the fact that because he gets 3 free turns so frequently, those 3 free turns that don't add to your turn count or anything like that, as long as you're not against a Lufenia orb that really hurts, like, or really doesn't do well with characters that hog turns, you're going to be doing a lot of damage with Vayne in a short space of time. It's just going to take longer physically because you're spreading it across multiple turns. But with his longevity, the fact that he adds all of this stuff, like, you don't typically get damage dealers that increase party-wide HP damage without a BT effect. So let's talk about the BT effect. Now, Giga Flare Sword is, again, multi-brave HP attack that when you go without the 2 out of 3 ingots, you get Party Brave regen again, Party Attack up again, Party Brave damage up again, Party Brave damage cap, which is really good for for damage going forwards. When it comes to just you doing damage and longevity, because having Brave cap is going to be really important for any damage dealers other than Vayne in your party, because if they're going to be capping, you're going to need to increase that cap to deal as much damage as possible. So that's actually a very noteworthy thing. And then from the 2 out of 3, he gives more bravery damage cap and more party attack. So he is actually quite a heavy Aura bot. He's not like the best Aura bot in the world, but he is a pretty strong Aura bot. And then he also, while he has his BT effect up, has a follow-up attack that triggers after an enemy is broken by your party, which with a book and not any ingots, you get a follow-up attack of 3 hit Brave HP twice, and if you have 2 out of 3 ingots or more, you get a 4 hit Brave HP attack that happens 2 times. So it's AoE Bravery, single target HP. This is not the strongest attack in the world, and this is the thing, is that Vayne is all about the sum of his parts rather than any individual part. His burst effect is 10 turns long, which means that, being a character that hogs turns, he is going to run out of this quite quickly if you're not careful. Whereas if you're using other characters that can sort of, work well with this, you can actually get quite a lot out of it. For example, one thing that I think that a lot of people overlook when it comes to Vayne, particularly with the global version, is characters that work well just doing damage off turn. Core being a very strong example. So there are 2 ways of going about this. You can either capitalize on the additional attack or the follow-up attacks from Vayne by having characters that break very frequently, such as Zell, maybe Aranea, something like that, or even waiting until the likes of Jekt come along, or Noel. They can work very well with Vayne. Or you can just use him as a damage dealer that happens to delay a lot, take a lot of turns up, and also be able to provide party auras at the same time. However, one thing I will say when it comes to Vayne is, if you're going to go for Vayne, you go all in or you don't go in at all. I don't think that Vayne is a character you would use pretty much at all without his BT, let alone his BT plus, or at 3 out of 3. He will burn through that burst effect very quickly when you've only got 1 copy of it, therefore you're going to want both. And the fact that you get extra bravery hits from his stuff means that he's going to deal more damage in his damage phases. By damage phase, I mean when you've got Conqueror's Power and you're just spamming Force of Will and all of those free turns, pushing the enemy back, re-breaking them, triggering that effect, and you're just going to get a surprisingly large amount of damage when you actually add it all up together. So while his follow-up is more specific, it doesn't trigger as often, and you do have to build your team around it a little bit. If you do build towards Vayne, it does pay off, and there is a lot of content going forward that actually can feature him very well. Like, I have seen him being used even now in JP, despite the fact that he is still a C80, being used in things like Snow and Edge's intertwined, or interwoven wills, or whatever they're called now, Ursula's event, even King's, like Heretic mission that's just come out. He does get used very frequently if you want him to. But he is a character that you're going to need to spend a lot of your time with and learn that he's not a character that you can actually just switch off and just spam Force of Will on its own and without thinking, because there are events, including his own, which is a bit odd, that punish you for taking too many turns without allowing the enemy to do so. And he's a character that takes a lot of turns and pushes enemy turns back. So you do have to be careful using Vayne. He's not somebody you can switch off with. But as somebody who's a massive fan of Vayne and somebody who's done a lot of research, watching a lot of videos of Vayne, I think people would be surprised that he's actually got a lot more longevity in him than people realise, even though when he came out in JP, people pegged him as the worst BT+. And he does have a lot of value for those that want it. So Cloud of Darkness and their cool abilities are much the same as they were last time that they came around. Vayne obviously has new ones, and honestly, I probably wouldn't use them all that much. Like, they're okay. Force of Will has a rebreak in it and increases party attack and max bravery for a few turns, and Contempt just increases party brave damage, attack max bravery, and gives bravery gen with a fairly meaty attack behind it. It's okay. I don't think I would use it in like over the top of a lot of other ones, but maybe. Like I don't like to write off any cool abilities, honestly, because I think that there are applications for a very large number of them, but this one doesn't massively stand out to me all that much. But in terms of high armor, I really like the fact that Vayne has Unity Keystone as his high armor, but he's like damage limits are 20% across the board for bravery and HP for himself, which I actually think works in his case. Normally you would just prefer it to be party-wide, but in his case, the numbers being higher, I think actually benefit him, and the fact that he's able to deal a large chunk of bravery hits and HP attacks within all those free turns that he gets. He's probably not going to be capping on his follow-up attack from his BT very often because the potencies on it are quite low, but in the right team, Vayne will churn out a lot of damage very quickly whilst breaking enemies, whilst regenerating his skills, getting loads of free turns to keep your turn count down, and providing things like HP damage up for your party. So like I said earlier, I think the thing to remember with Vayne is that A, you can't just switch off and spam Force of Will and push one enemy back forever and ever and ever. It won't work very well in certain missions. There are, however, like plenty of missions where you can do that and it will work. And therefore you might need to break things out of order. But one of the nice things about being a rebreaker as opposed to a delayer is that sometimes it's a bit easier to maneuver enemy turns so that you can allow enemy turns to still happen if you need them to, such as in his own event. And B, I do think that he is a character that is more the sum of his parts rather than any individual thing. He is a damage dealer that happens to rebreak and therefore delay, that provides party auras, has a BT, and can provide a large amount of party offensive buffs by doing so, and also just has lots of little bits and pieces in here that trigger a lot of particular Lufenia orbs that will like be worthwhile going forward as well. So while a lot of people don't like Vayne, I can understand why. He can be a real hassle to build around. He is going to require his BT plus at 3 out of 3 realistically to be used properly. He's got a lot more specifics to him. He's a turn hogger, which means that buffs will fall off of him quickly. There will be certain characters that don't work very well with him. He might be more hassle for some people than he's worth. For others that really like him, like me, he will definitely pay dividends if you choose to. So now let's take a look at the event that features Vayne and Cloud of Darkness, which is going to be against the Rafflesias. Now, we have fought these before through Jack's event, and obviously the thing with them then was that if they get the concentrating buff, you have to let a certain number of turns pass before they get a turn, otherwise their attacks cleanse them of debuffs and are a lot stronger. The caveat with this particular version of the fight is that not only does it punish you for letting them take turns while they have the concentrating buff up, it also punishes you for taking too many turns at once. Now this is a bit of a weird one considering that the Synergy character wants to take a lot of turns, but it is an exercise in self-restraint basically, and not just spamming Vayne and delaying the enemies until it goes like to the end of the earth. Because if you take 12 turns in a row, they will jump forwards and then use their AoE Brave HP that also cleanses their debuff, so you have to be very careful not to allow that to happen. You can get past it by using the likes of Warrior of Light Call, Setzer's freezes, or buffs, that stop them from dealing damage to you, 9 for example, but it's strenuous. It's better to have off-turn damage or just large amounts of damage that allow you to push past them without them getting to teleport turns and just wreck you, because cleansing those debuffs is nasty. So if you're using Setzer, instead of using your freezes like to stop the teleporting turns, make it so that it's available for when they are actually using their turns, so that you can defend yourself whilst also buffing the amount of damage they have. This is a Lufenia Plus mission. There are very, very high like bravery drains or bravery gain reductions, damage reductions, and going off of some of the sites that I'm seeing here. So once again, big shout outs to Leo Bob, Rem, Dissidia Compendium, and Tombury Troop as well. You've got 70% or 90% rather, and 80%, so it's big reduction. So defense ignore is going to be really popular here as well if you've got access to that. Off-turn damage in general is really good. If you have Ace lying around, then you can absolutely use Ace for this. But you're going to want stacking offensive auras in some manner or another, whether it's through Vayne, or whether it's through Ace, whether it's through Barts. There's loads of options that you have available to you, but you have to be very careful not to allow the enemies to take too many turns, but also you have to not take too many turns yourself, but also not allow the enemy to take too many turns, because then they'll punish you with the concentrating buff instead. So you have a very, very tight turn count on this as well, so make sure whatever damage you are bringing is pushing past that massive reduction so that you're able to deal as much damage as possible. Cloud of Darkness is fantastic here because of the follow-up damage, because of the delay when you need it but not when you don't. Cloud of Darkness will do absolutely fantastically here. So just be careful of those particular things and watch some videos, because these next few Lufenia missions are quite weirdly strict on the things that you need to do. Definitely check some videos out there. There's loads of them out there. I've watched a good 20, 25 different clears for this particular event. There are plenty of options available to you. So with the actual should you pull portion of the video, I've gone a little bit more in detail than I usually do, but that's because I'm a huge fan of Vayne's, and I feel that Vayne gets swept under the rug a lot by the JP community. It's very, very black and white when it comes to that. People either love Vayne or they hate him, or they think he's awful. But, like I said, if you actually just type Vayne Lufenia Plus into Google or YouTube, you'll actually find there are far more recent events that use him than you might expect. So what I've done here is I've put a list of what I feel good pros and potential cons for him might be, so that I can at least try and give you a good idea of how I feel about him. I think that he has a good combination of things that he provides. Yes, these next few events actually don't work very well with Vayne, which is weird because they're the ones that he's synergy for, but there's a misunderstanding that people think you can't use Vayne for these missions, and you absolutely can. You just can't just switch your brain off and spam Force of Will. He has skills for days, skill regens, BT phase, which means he gets an extra use of his LD on top of the 4 that he already gets. He ain't running out of that buff anytime soon. He's a turn hogger, which means he's able to make use of other people's BT effects and call abilities without having to drain their skill uses, or if you've only got one copy of an LD call ability, a turn hogger is like the best thing you can ask for. People who like Tidus will probably really like Vayne, which again, I know it's weird because I don't like Tidus, but I like Vayne. But I actually am coming around on Tidus, beside the point. He does actually deal a large amount of damage as well. Like, he doesn't look like he does because he doesn't have quite as many HP dumps all at once, but he does actually do it all if you add all the turns up. And the fact that he is providing party-wide auras, including HP damage up, as well as re-breaking 3 times every time he goes into his Conqueror's Power phase, and then BT phase, he's pushing them further back. LD is instant turn as well. I'm not sure if I even mentioned that, but it's instant turn regardless of whether you have Conqueror's Power or not. So you're always going to get those next 3 turns of Force of Will if you want it, or if you can actually maneuver a lot of different things with Vayne, and he's actually very versatile. And the fact that he has Brave Damage Cap included in his BT effect will help his longevity. However, if you are only going for his LD, personally, I wouldn't bother. You'll get use of him from a few events, but going forward, you will probably just use other characters over Vayne unless you're going for the BT. If you want the LD to maybe pick up the BT with burst tokens later, Sure, but honestly, by that point, there are probably other characters you would have wanted by that point. If you're wanting Vayne, you're going all in for him, and if you're not prepared to do that, then I would suggest not bothering going for him at all. Having 3 turns in a row all the time, Lufenia orbs will tick down from that, so make sure that your party is built to cater to that, or that it's actually effective in the fight that you're taking him to. And his BT Plus is more specific than Cloud of Darkness is, which means that there are certain characters that, you know, won't trigger it very often. That doesn't necessarily make him bad, but it does mean that there are certain situations where there are other characters you'd probably rather take. And because he takes a lot of turns, like any turn hogger, if you're around buff characters rather than aura bots, those buffs are going to fall off of him quickly. And like I said, he doesn't look like he deals all that much damage, but if you take into account all of the turns he has and the sum of his parts, which is a phrase I've said a lot in this video, the fact that he provides the auras, the re-breaks, the follow-ups, all of that stuff on top of the damage that he's doing, and the skill regens, which is actually used in a couple of Lufenia missions like Shulks or Kings that have just happened. There are certain things that Vayne does excel very well at, and if you like him, he's going to do really well for you. If you don't, you will never need him. He's one of those kinds of characters. Cloud of Darkness, on the other hand, is a lot more simple than Vayne and does a very, very good job. They do what they do, they've always done, and they do it even better because the BT effect is longer. That 50% damage increase on HP damage is horrible. It's a lot of extra damage considering that they have multiple HP dumps, that follow-up attack, the brave damage cap by naturally doing bursts and with high armor plus, etc. Those follow-up attacks are going to hurt a lot. Ironically, Cloud of Darkness and Vayne actually work quite well together, but we have to make choices when it comes to BT pluses because we don't have the resources to go all in on them. Therefore, if you're prepared to go all in on Vayne and find the nuance of the character that you really enjoy, go for Vayne. If you would rather have somebody that's a bit more simplistic or rather just gets the job done, as it were, and is a bit more splashable in anything and is a killer friend unit as well, go for Cloud of Darkness. The LD characters that are on the banner, Iroha and Strago, also really interesting. They're both very good at what they do. Like, Iroha has a fantastic LD call ability and has a lot of unique quirks to her kit, such as building up the EX to use twice and being a healer bot that's not really a healer bot and having the LD ability so you're not using all your bravery. She's very interesting. And Strago is a defense ignoring, re-breaking AoE damage dealer that gets a really nice future later on. And then finally, of course, it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to let your voice be heard and let everyone know whether you would or wouldn't pull on any given banner and why. So once again, a massive thank you goes out to my patrons for their votes and their comments, and thankfully I did this poll before the community stream, so I managed to get enough time to get the votes in before the stuff dropped. Otherwise it would have been a bit later, this video, and it's coming out very, very soon, so we didn't have time for that. Anyways, with Cloud of Darkness's banner, 0% said gems, 0% said more than 100 tickets, 5% said less than 100 tickets, and 95% of people said no. I think this is purely on the back of the fact that pretty much anyone who wanted Cloud of Darkness already has them, and Strago, there's been multiple opportunities to get Strago, and there'll be other opportunities to get Strago in the future as well. So quite honestly, while Cloud of Darkness and Strago are actually really good, this result doesn't actually surprise me. What does surprise me, however, a little bit is the results of the Vayne poll, because I was expecting to have to really fight my corner when it came to Vayne, because I love him, and I honestly expected everyone else to absolutely poop on him. 30% of people said they were using gems, 50% of people said they were using 100 more tickets, 7% said 100 less tickets, and 13% of people said nope. I'm honestly quite stunned by that, because like I said, the community as a whole, when he came out in JP, people weren't interested, people didn't like him, people thought he was bad. I was just like, okay, I still think he's really good, and he's a character I planned multiple events including his own batch, that I will use him in, because I don't think he's as bad in his own events as people think he is, as long as you have the BT plus green. And I can't help but I love him, and therefore I think that I want to fight his corner. But apparently I'm not alone in it. Anyways, going into some of the comments. Kenan McKenzie says, I have Cloud of Darkness and Strago's full kit, so I can ignore the banner and go straight for the good stuff. Vayne has been my favourite character in the game ever since his initial release and someone I used in nearly every single Chaos stage and even some Lufenias. His LD giving him free skill uses of the plus versions help him be less conservative since that was one of his main issues. His burst effect triggering strong follow-up attacks whenever he or an ally breaks an enemy is also a nice treat and helps him pair with characters that love re-breaks. Super excited drop from soon, examples Zell, Noel and Lightning. Now, one thing I will say, it's actually his rework that stops him from getting having to use the skill uses on the plus versions. And I think that honestly, the follow-up attack is icing on the cake. The bits that I personally care about most when it comes to the BT effect are the fact that that follow-up attack boosts his own stuff, so that he's actually doing a lot more HP dumps within those 3 turns, as well as the fact that he's able to bolster Brave damage cap and pretty hefty offensive stats on his party while still being a delaying damage dealer himself. I think that that's the bit that I really like about Vayne, but I'm glad that other people really like him as well. Cobalt said, Cloud of Strago, easy skip because I've already got them both. Pretty common trait across the board. Vayne is an interesting prospect and I'd quite like to build some teams around him. Like other characters I enjoy, like El Nash, he's not a fire and forget unit. You'll want to build a team around him to maximise his utility, especially from his BT effect, but I enjoy that style of play. Blasting stuff with range is good fun, but I do enjoy variety. Ira would be a nice bonus catch, as I skipped her original release, but I've had a bit of a regret since after seeing others get good use out of her, so a decent chunk of tickets for Vayne, bordering on as many as it takes, but realistically calling it at 400. I can live without him, I'd just rather not. For me, it's gems. I really want this, and I would love to get Iroha along the way. If I got Vayne, I would stop. But I do want the BT, so I'd be tempted to continue, but I actually really want Kate Sith as well, so personally, this is a character that I will personally BT token because I adore him, but I'm not sure whether I would suggest other people do unless they go in for the LD in, to try to kind of test the water and then BT token him, but I just, if he is just an all or nothing character, that's just the way he is. Dog Shooty says, all gems for House Solidor. Vayne is unfortunately misrepresented by being the first BT unit that both really wants his BT and to be green. This is the rule going forward, Zidane and Ace were the exceptions. Additionally, people will expect him to be like Lightning, a damage dealer you throw at the problem till it dies. Vayne is complex, you need to manage your turns and plan ahead, leading to him being underrepresented and many believe to be underpowered. I can tell you firsthand that it's far from the case. The complaint of he needs the right support kind of falls flat when that describes every damage dealer in the game. I'm not going to try to convince you, you've made your decision already, but writing on Vayne is a mistake I shan't be making. Strago is still the best AoE damage dealer until the Twins, which is not far away, and Cloud of Darkness is well there too. In my opinion, you get the same kind of results from using her as a friend unit as you would with them in the party, just less of it, and if I had to choose a friend unit that has a damage follow-up, I'd just pick X-Death. I'm not so sure I would just pick X-Death at this point. I like the fact that X-Death doesn't deal bravery damage or steal turns, and therefore the friend unit runs out quicker. But I do think that there is merit to having Cloud of Darkness, over Vayne in some cases. Like I said, it's a choice thing, and this is something that's very, very true of BT units across the board. Basically, you can just pick your favourites and run with them, and that's a big message that not only I, but many content creators will put across as well. There are some that are real standouts, but honestly, there is no wrong choice here. But if you're going to invest in a BT Plus character, invest in them. And then lastly, Nalthian says, Vayne is a tough one for me as well. I loved his EX incarnation, I didn't get much use of his EX+. I've many have pointed out Vayne is a green or nothing, and I very much doubt he's a character I'm going to invest in for green. I'll try to tick it as LD because having it will give me some flexibility if I pick up his BT later. I'm skipping Cloud of Darkness and Strago, I already have both LDs and I'm not going to chase a banner for a BT. Strago still punches above his weight with his instant break and defense ignore, and Cloud of Darkness BT Plus is a nice glow up, so I'd consider it if I didn't have both already. Yeah, anyone who wanted Cloud of Darkness has it already, but if you're a newer player, honestly, I probably wouldn't pull on either of these necessarily, because Vayne is quite complex to build around, and Cloud of Darkness, Cloud of Darkness will carry you through a lot of content, to be fair, but again, there's a bit of complexity, unless you're already clearing the Lufenia pluses, you're not getting the ingots to necessarily max out Cloud of Darkness, which means you're probably not going to use them that much going forward. So this is very much, with resources in general, it is very much an all or nothing type situation. So that's going to be all for today's video. Thank you very much for sticking around this long and listening to me gush over Vayne because I love him. And let me know in the comments below whether you're pulling for Vayne, whether you think that he is as underpowered as people say that he was, or whether you think that he's misrepresented like I and certain other people do as well. He's a very contentious character and I think he's going to create a lot of discussions. Personally, I'm very excited to use him with Core because I think that he turn hogs, but just enough that Core can still get turns in to refresh the buffs, and because it's off-turn damage on top of Vayne, it doesn't eke into extra turns like Zell or Lightning would. I think there's a lot of really fun interactions with those two, so I'm really looking forward to trying that. But let me know in the comments below what you guys think. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications on any future videos I might be making. And hopefully this game will be nice to me for Vayne, because god damn it, I want to pull a BT at some point. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you then. Take care.